I just finished my shopping. It wasn't too busy there, but there were a few people. Right behind me, you can see social distancing is just not happening. Mind you, the way this is all panning out, I'm coming more and more to the conclusion that this is not much worse than the normal flu. And I think, you know, there are agendas out there by people who want to cause catastrophe, push their own barrow. We've had this with the global warming situation, where people with vested interest make money out of it, so they push the agenda. And I think that's happening here. There's actually a theory that they're closing down America to basically undermine Trump, because of course he's been pushing his re-election on how he's handled the economy. And if they think they can undermine the economy, well, all well and good. And you've got to remember that fairly prominent commentators from the soft left have actually asked for or wanted a recession in America, simply because of it would actually make it hard for Trump. They don't care about the common people. They're suffering under recession. They just want their political agenda to be established, and there's a lot of people out there that think like that. It's very sick, and unfortunately they're not that rare. So yeah, it's a bit windy today. I don't know how much of this is coming through. It's not the greatest day to film. It's quite a pleasant day, but it's got a constant breeze. So yeah, there is this theory going around which does, you know, it does sound plausible that there's such vitriol against Trump, and he is such a stumbling block to the left and the globalists, that he is obviously a huge target, and they will do anything to get rid of him, because without Trump, a lot of this momentum wouldn't have occurred. I mean, like, he's the man who took on the WHO, for instance, the World Health Organization. Australia's response was much wimpier than that. They didn't even cut any of the funding, and I think that's rather regrettable. I think they did call for reform of the organisation, but we should be taking up any excuse we can get to cut our costs, and if it means cutting money from an organisation that's pretty corrupt and ineffectual and just plain wrong, in this case with the current coronavirus, they've just been so pro-China that they've caused us damage. I know, why should we be throwing money at an organisation like that? It's insanity. But again, vested interests, yeah, they like it. Now, I'm hoping that, you know, Australia takes a more independent course from China. I think it's looking that way. It's looking that even countries that have been pretty obsequious towards them have actually are now getting a little bit of a backbone. So I think the Chinese are in for a bit of a surprise. It'll take a few months to sink through, but I'm expecting some interesting developments in that part of the world in the near future. So we'll just see how it all goes. But yeah, right now I just got myself some more tonic water so I can make more G&Ts, a very high priority. I actually completed a video this morning. I don't normally do that, but I actually had some technical difficulties putting it together yesterday. I took some audio from Alan Jones's show yesterday, because he put the Queensland Premier under the pump quite a bit, and it was quite a good interview, and I took a segment of that, but it was very hard for me to get a copy of that audio. Whether it had been encrypted or something, I don't know, but I had to change the format, and it seems to work now, so hopefully you'll enjoy that. By the way, there was more toilet paper on the shelves today than I've seen since this corona scare has blossomed, so that was interesting. Also plenty of pasta, but there was nothing in the cheap range, none of the home brand stuff that I could see, so hopefully it'll come later, but it sort of fulfills my expectations that the supermarkets are actually improving their profit margins due to coronavirus, because they're selling more expensive products where there's no choice that people used to have in the past. So maybe a little over the top conspiracy wise, but I think when their results come out, you'll find that these companies are doing rather well, as opposed to other companies are getting hit really hard because of it. So it's not very fair the way this has affected certain areas, and others have been basically unaffected. So that's sort of can divide the economy, divide people in the society, because you're having the haves and the have-nots. So could be consequences from that too.
Bullet from Beijing. Chinese state media boss calls Australia gum on the bottom of our shoe as tensions boil over when Beijing ambassador threatens to kill our economy in revenge for inquiry into the spread of COVID-19. Unbelievable. Well, there's one thing you can say for sure, is that the Chinese have the diplomatic skills of Genghis Khan. I mean, this is crazy stuff. They are patently responsible for the spread of this virus. They could have stopped it, yet they allowed overseas flights to take place while stopping internal flights in China. So they didn't give a crap about the people in the rest of the world, and yet they have the temerity to threaten us. As I say, the Beijing leadership are just a group of gangsters. This isn't the first time that the Chinese Empire has isolated itself. It happened years ago when they had the treasure ships going out to the far corners of the earth. There could have been a time when they could have been the colonial masters of the world, but they pulled back because they had an emperor who was more inward looking. They don't have an inward-looking emperor now. They have someone who basically wants to dominate the world with the Chinese Communist Party at the helm, and it ain't working, and they're not happy, and they don't know how to adjust, and they're basically chucking a gigantic hissy fit. And it's not just Australia that's taking a lot of this vitriol. It is also places like Europe and America. They are like a cornered animal, and they are striking back. It's a strange old world at the moment. I find myself actually in support of what George Soros is saying about China as well. Billionaire investor George Soros slammed Chinese President Xi Jinping as the most dangerous enemy to those who believe in open society, and warned against Beijing's high-tech surveillance regime. And I totally agree. China is not the only authoritarian regime in the world, but it is the wealthiest, strongest, and technologically most advanced. I want to call attention to the moral danger facing open societies from the instruments of control that machine learning and artificial intelligence can put in the hands of repressive regimes, Soros said, according to CNBC. The social credit system is not yet fully operational, but it's clear where it's heading. It will subordinate the fate of the individual to the interests of the one-party state in ways unprecedented in history. And I agree, that is really dangerous stuff. Actually, he does share some views there with Elon Musk, who is also very worried about the ramifications of sophisticated AI. And I think this is one example of it where it's actually controlling our lives. So I've also found myself in agreement with Michael Moore with his latest documentary, to a large extent anyway, and that is called The Planet of the Humans, and he's having a look at some of the dodgy schemes that the Greens have come up with over the years. And the person actually narrating is an elder statesman in the Green movement who has seen the light, and Michael Moore is the executive producer, so he's putting up the money. Now, this may be just because Michael Moore's realised that he's had a one or two flops of recent times with his documentaries, where he's been pushing the old hardline leftist narrative, and he may just simply believe that he can't make money out of that, and now he's just doing the expedient thing and trying to pivot a bit so he can actually get a bigger audience. But he may also believe that it's pretty shonky. I mean, just because he makes documentaries about certain subjects doesn't mean he necessarily believes in it. He'd like the audience to think that, but I've got my doubts. I think he's quite mercenary, but that's just my opinion. But I've got to admit that I find that the questioning of the efficacy of all these green policies is a very good thing. and people, the usual suspects come under the blowtorch, like Al Gore. Oh, the other thing I wanted to mention about Xi Jinping is that before he took over this role, we don't even know how he became leader, because there's no transparency in China, the way that the leadership works, similar to what happened in the Soviet Union. No Western people really knew what was going on. They found it quite a surprise when the empire collapsed, and I'm hoping that we're at a similar point with China regarding that as well. I do know for a fact that there are Chinese that are quite cynical about the leadership. I know this from first hand because I was talking to a friend who actually lived in China for over a year, in central China, in a large city of 10 million people, an IT centre. And he was having a chat to a friend of his, and he speaks Mandarin, so he could actually speak to him in his native language. And he was amazed at how negative this guy was being about the leadership in China. He was openly having a go at them, and he wasn't quiet about it apparently. And my friend was very surprised and was telling him, "You sure you should be speaking like this out in the open?" But he got away with it. So it just shows that there is dissent in China. So there is a possibility that the change could take place. I mean, I've even seen fights take place against authority in North Korea in a documentary. I was absolutely quite staggered. But I remember an old lady was having a go at some official over something or other, and she wasn't dragged away to a camp or anything. So it's maybe not quite as punitive as we might think. There is some wiggle room there for the locals to actually vent their spleen, and I think they've got a lot to vent about right now in mainland China. I'm very happy that Australia has taken a hard line against the Chinese. It's good to see our politicians finally growing a pair and actually standing up to them. And if it means we lose trade, well, so be it. We're the biggest trading partner with China, so they're going to lose out big time too. So I think they're going to have to reassess the way they're acting, because it's going to really hit them hard. Please consider subscribing to my channel if you think there's anything there of use to you, or entertainment or whatever. And either do that or give me a thumbs up, or if you're feeling really energetic, do both. That'd be great. But please don't ignore me. That's the worst thing you can do on YouTube, is be ignored.